first word is translation. The definition of the translation is the process of converting text from one language to another while preserving the meaning, right? So there's different translations, and those have so many different dialogues or arguments for and against, whatever. But what we're really getting into is what does that translation say about a subject? So we're going to pick a subject, we're going to read it, right? For the most part, in the Christian American church, there's not a lot of doctrinal differences based off of the fact that the King James said it this way versus the NIV said it that way. There's not a lot. There might be subtle things, and if so, those are very subtle and very. So it's not like there's an entire denomination that's built off of what the King James said versus a different one based off the same verse and what the NIV said. So we're not really getting into that. However, there are people who believe that one translation is superior to the other. We understand those people exist. We grew up in that world. We understand that. That is a conversation we will have, just
Yes.
not today. And like I said, I believe that the majority of the time, those denominational differences don't happen because of mistranslation in the American church. I'll say that. Do you agree?
I agree, and I've done a lot of research, you know, in my own time, especially when I was trying to figure out when it comes to the Bible, like how can I trust the Bible? When I was, you know, a very young Christian, how can I trust the Bible? And I did a lot of research into how the translation process goes, and when it comes to these well-established Bible translations, ESV, NIV, NLT, NASB, King KJV.
You better say it.
Yeah, I know. You can go on and on and on. You can trust the process because they put so many scholars across not just one denomination or things of that nature, but different theological mind scholars, people who know these languages so well. The process is very thorough. Research it for yourself, but I did it for myself, and I could say I was very happy with the process. That being said, there are some that you need to be wary of, stay away from, like one-person single translations, where biases can get interjected. But overall, the definition of a translation is that where you try to get the meaning of that text into the new language. And it's not going to be perfect. There's no such thing as a 100% accurate word-for-word translation, but is the general meaning, at least at a minimum, preserved?
There are translations that their focus in life is the closest word for word that's possible. That's all they care about. And I want to tell you that those translations are somewhat difficult to read because they take away the easiness of reading it to get the focus of 100% word for word correct. On the other side, there's translations whose thought for thought. You'll see that word a lot in these. The thought for thought will take the context of or take what it says, and instead of writing it exactly word for word, it'll say what they believe in, what they think it says, what they believe it says. The problem with that can be that whose thought they say, well, where's their background, what's their heart, are they intending to get you the word of God strictly? So you can see there's a battle there, and then there's some. The NASB is word for word / thought for thought. Word for word's first, thought for thought second, and so that's why I like it the best. I will almost always on this podcast read out of my Thompson's NASB. Thompson's chain reference, by the way. Thompson's chain reference, by the way, is the best Bible you can get.
That is one of the things Jonathan and I do agree of. While we come from different, secondary theological spectrums, we do love the NASB 95. It is our favorite translation.
Mine's a 77 because you can't get it the Thompson. You can't get it in the 95. So there's subtle differences.
That's another thing I love about the NASB because they don't stop printing and selling their older like the NIV. The 1984 NIV was my favorite version of the NIV. I wasn't too much of a fan of the 2011. You can't buy the 84 anymore unless you go to a thrift store or anything. You have to buy the 2011, which kind of leads me into my last point about translations. Just people know translation when we're talking about it. There are mainly two different types. You see, there's subgenres and whatnot, but like we said, there's word for word, and then there's thought for thought. Thought for thought is that dynamic equivalent, something like the NIV. If you didn't know, funny story, the NIV was actually made because a man wanted to preach the gospel to people, and he was reading out of the KJV, and this is in the 1950s, and people had no idea what he was saying. That's how the NIV actually came to fruition. And they, instead of doing what a lot of people did, where they used the King James as kind of the basis of their Bible, they ended up going straight to the Greek and Hebrew manuscripts, and then using this new form. Dynamic equivalence was new back then. And the best way I can explain is, if you ever heard somebody translate, like say you have a friend who speaks in Spanish and you got another friend right there who speaks Spanish and English, and he starts translating for you, he's not going to say exactly what he's saying word for word to you. He's going to give you the general idea. That's dynamic equivalence, or thought for thought. He's just relaying the point, word for word accuracy if you can, but not really at the forefront.